Welcome to another video in the VVT saga. I'm your host Greg Peters, you are watching the Car Passion channel, and today I'm talking about boost control. More specifically, upgrading the Borg Warner to a dual port internal wastegate actuator and a 4-port electronic boost control solenoid. And also explaining what all that means. So come join me. Now, in order to understand boost control, my dudes, you must first understand wastegates. So let's start with the basics. Now you've got hot exhaust gas coming through these tubes known as the manifold, and they go into the back half of the turbo, also known as the turbine housing. Now all that hot exhaust gas is spinning the turbine wheel. As a result, the compressor wheel is now spinning and generating boost. So as the boost builds, more air is going into the engine, which means more exhaust is coming out, spinning the turbo faster, generating more boost. The more boost gets generated, the bigger your smile gets, the more Mustangs you smoke, until the boost goes so high you blow up your motor and have to call the fire department. But we're not here to dwell on the past. So before you have to make a video explaining to 50,000 people that you blew up your engine, we're gonna find a way to keep the boost under control. So the turbo has spun up, you're at your desired boost level, and now what happens is the wastegate opens. And you've got a big port right there for all the extra exhaust gas to go around the turbine, and it will not spin it up too fast. And this little door opening and closing while you're in boost is what controls your boost level. So now that you understand the principle of a wastegate, let me explain how it's controlled. Now the easiest way for me to show you how this works would be to remove it and take it apart, but like all OEM wastegate actuators, you can't take them apart, you can't replace the spring, you can't do anything with them. But lucky for you, I've got a single port Turbo Smart, which I can take apart and show you how that works. Works the same exact way as this. So I've got my dual port wastegate actuator, which I'll get to in just a minute, but for now I'm gonna disassemble the single port and show you how that one works. If you ever take one of these apart, be extremely careful. These threads right here, as you uncover them, they're sharper than razor blades. I cut myself so bad taking this thing apart last time, and I couldn't even figure out why. Alright, so you've got a spring right here, and this is a 7-pound spring, and this is the spring that holds the wastegate closed. You can see when this piston is all the way down, that rod is pushed out, and the spring is pushing back, holding the wastegate closed. What happens when boost starts to build is the pressurized air comes either from the compressor or from the intercooler piping through this port right here into the top, and it pushes down on this piston and it fights against the spring. This being a 7 psi spring, when 7 psi air is on top of this piston, it will then fight against the spring all the way and open the wastegate. Now, you can alter this with a boost controller. What the boost controller does is it limits the amount of air coming into this port. So it might wait until the engine is at 14 psi, then it will let the 7 psi through this port to open the wastegate. So it's a very simple design, and that's how it works. Now for the most part, you can run approximately double the boost of your wastegate spring. And a couple things start to happen once you go past that. Number one, the exhaust gas will force the wastegate door open, okay? So the spring is not strong enough anymore to hold the wastegate closed. It will force it open, and then your boost won't raise anymore. The other thing is when the wastegate is open, the spring is so light it can have a hard time opening and closing the wastegate to control the boost level. Now the solution to this is simply to run a stiffer spring. If you want to run 25 pounds of boost, you can go ahead and put a 13-pound spring in here. So you'll run 13 pounds base pressure, 26 pounds of boost, you'll be able to control it a lot easier. But the problem is the spring tells you the lowest boost you can run. So now 13 is the lowest boost you can run. Well, on my setup, I want to be able to run really low boost, at least down to 7 pounds, and I'm planning on running probably 25 pounds of boost on ethanol, so I need a solution for that. And that solution is the dual port wastegate actuator. Now, you've still got a spring in the bottom, you've got a piston in there, the spring holds the wastegate closed, but when the car gets into boost, a special type of boost control solenoid can also let pressure underneath the piston to help hold the wastegate closed when you have a really light spring. So that enables you to run this wastegate. You could run down to a 3 psi spring and have good boost control anywhere from 3 to 40 psi. Let me take this thing apart and I'll show you the inner workings. You can see immediately one difference is this has a dual spring, and the other one I believe you can run dual springs as well, The way this one comes set up when you first buy it, it's set at 14 psi minimum pressure. It's got two 7 psi springs in it. You can take one of the 7 psi springs out to make 7 psi, and they make a bunch of different rates. You can run up to 3 springs at once inside this, and it stacks the pressure. So if you run 3 7 psi springs, you'll have a 21 psi wastegate. But to me, if you have a dual port wastegate, you should run a really soft spring because you've got good boost control no matter what. You're really just setting your minimum boost. Now you can see inside there you've got one port that goes underneath this piston that can help hold the wastegate closed. And you've still got your port on top of the piston which will open the wastegate and fight against the spring. So this is the perfect solution to what I want. To be able to run really low boost, maybe on 91 octane, and be able to just absolutely crank it up on ethanol. Another scenario you might use this in is if you're running boost by gear and you run a really low boost in the beginning gears or the first and second gear due to traction, but you run a really high boost in the later gears. So it's a really cool part. It's not that much more expensive than the single port version, but you do need a special electronic boost control solenoid in order to operate this properly. So I'll start with the simple single port actuator and 3-port solenoid. This solenoid style is pretty much what you're going to find with any entry-level boost controller. And it can control internal and external wastegates. Let me mock up the connections and I'll show you how it works. So how do you spell air wrong? This is how a traditional electronic boost control system is hooked up. You've got pressurized air coming from the compressor of the turbo or your intercooler piping. That comes into the electronic boost control solenoid. From there it can go one of 2 directions, either out to open atmosphere or into the wastegate actuator. What controls that, you ask? Well, the solenoid is hooked up either to your standalone ECU or to a boost controller, and that's what controls the solenoid itself. The 2 scenarios are pressurized air is coming in from the turbo. If the boost controller or ECU is demanding more boost, it's going to take the pressure that's coming in and let it right into the atmosphere through this filter. It's not going to use it. But if you're getting close to your target or you're at your target, it's going to take that pressurized air and send it into the actuator, which will open the wastegate. But if you're getting close to your target or you're at your target boost, the ECU or boost controller will tell the solenoid to let the pressure into the actuator. The pressure coming in here is going to fight against that spring and open the gate. Now, the 4-port solenoid and the dual port actuator work using the same basic principle, but with one major difference. You've still got an electronic boost controller or standalone ECU controlling the solenoid itself. You've still got a single feed line from the compressor of the turbo or from your intercooler piping. But where the magic happens is at the solenoid. Now you've got 3 options as to where this air can go. You have a single line leading to the top of the piston, and that's the one that fights against the spring to open the wastegate. You've got your little exhaust filter here, that's where the air can escape to open atmosphere. But the main difference being, you now have a second line that feeds underneath the piston inside the wastegate actuator, and that's what holds the wastegate closed. It forces it to stay shut when the engine is running high boost and you're running a soft spring inside your actuator. Alright, I think I've done enough talking. I cannot wait to get this actuator installed, but first I've got to remove the old actuator and the old boost control solenoid. I threaded this nut on all the way, which means the gate is closed, but I do want to add a little bit of preload, maybe about 2 millimeters. As far as mounting up the solenoid, I'm definitely way too chicken to drill and tap my compressor housing, but I don't really think this looks that good anyways. So I'm probably gonna mount it somewhere over here on the car itself, and that way it'll still keep my vacuum lines short and clean. Alright ladies and gents, well I hope you learned something about boost control in this video. If you did, don't forget to leave it a like, maybe even give it a share. Guys, the more views these videos get, the better projects I can take on, the cooler videos I can make. It really helps me. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.
Back from the dead.